Well, hi. Welcome back to this week's episode of Kind of a Bitch. So I will be honest, I'm stepping into this recording thinking about how I'm going to talk about this particular topic. And the thing is, recording a podcast, I feel, has taught me a lot about my own processing. And sometimes that is that I want to be very sure. I want to be really educated and confident on what I believe, what I think, what my delivery is going to sound like. And something I have learned throughout this recording process is that I don't always get to do that. Sometimes it's just time to talk about a topic or a story or an experience that I have had without analyzing and breaking it down for myself. And I will say, I do think this is its own method of processing. But I'm definitely walking into this particular recording going, oh, like, am I going to sound like a bitch though? Am I going to sound like a bitch? And this really relates right back to the topic at hand, which is you don't owe anyone a performance when you are setting a boundary. You don't owe anyone a performance when you're setting a boundary. Okay. Now, when I'm creating for this program, for this podcast, I am often looking for patterns. I'm looking for patterns in my own life so that I can find stories that might work to demonstrate lessons that I'm learning, right? And one of the patterns that I have seen this week on more than one occasion is the need to set a boundary, but the fear, that the pressure that comes up when I do that. Because if you listen to last week's episode, I am very conscious of the way that I'm perceived by somebody else. And sometimes that consciousness, I'm using quotation marks if you're listening, that consciousness is also made up. Like I can't confirm what somebody else is thinking of me at any given moment, but I definitely want to control it. And so this has come up a number of times this past week, and I'm going to dive into some of it. Perhaps around the holiday season, you need some of this topic talked about as well, because I know for all of us, there's a lot of energy around the holidays. There's a lot of emotions around the holidays, and it's especially easy when you're around family or around other stressed out people that you kind of start to melt back into old habits or old ways of thinking. So perhaps this will land a certain way for you. So I told you that I look for patterns, and I'm going to talk about one specific story this week, but there were more of these throughout the week that I will perhaps bring up at different points during the rest of this podcast, but we'll see how we go. So I am I'm a real estate agent, as many of you know, and that means that I am working and communicating with a lot of different people at all times. My personal interpretation of this job is kind of herding cats. I do my job, which is to show the houses or guide people based on what I can see in the market itself. And once I have them under contract, my job does not end there. Now I am managing the lender. Now I am managing the title and escrow company. Now I'm managing my own client to make sure that they are transferring money when they need to and that they are following the terms of the contract. And I think that most producing agents would agree with me on that. Like that is part of this job. Um, that's part of what we signed up for here, and I like that part. But what I will say is that not every agent believes that, and you will run into all types of people in this industry, and it can be rather disheartening. So this week, I had a moment with another agent that really is sticking with me. He didn't manage his client. He didn't manage the title company that he chose, and ultimately caused a delay by not doing his part of the job. While me and my clients were jumping through hoops to make sure that we did do our part of the job. And so when that delay was caused, not only did he shift responsibility from himself, he did not accept any of the fault, which is a big pet peeve of mine when it is your fault. And then he kind of spoke to me like I was his assistant. He delegated some tasks to me as the other professional in the transaction, and talked to me as if I was like an assistant or something like that. And in the moment, I was so I was so mad. I was so mad. And I felt this pressure come up to explain, to justify myself, then also to soften my feelings, but also to perform niceties, and I felt like I wanted to teach him. I wanted to show him and educate him, to prove why he was in the wrong, right? I had all these things that was coming up, and I could feel this tension, this urge to type out a nice long message, to just give him a call and give him a piece of my mind, to make sure he understood why he was wrong and why I was doing my job, but he wasn't, instead of just saying what I needed to say and enforce my boundary. And luckily, I was on the phone with my husband at the time. So when I saw the messages come through, I'm like, what the? I'm immediately losing it. And so I had a moment to reflect instead of initially respond, which is good for all of us. And so instead of typing out a lengthy response on how he'd messed up and how frustrated I was and all the other stuff that I could have educated him on, that I could have shown him on, I just responded and said, no, I actually can't take care of that form. I'm driving at the moment. Let me know when you send it over. I I just responded and said I couldn't. And you know what? The world didn't end. Okay. It might not have felt as satisfying as it would have felt to lay out all the ways that he'd messed up. Cause boy, believe me, I wanted to. But I know that I left, with my head above water. I left kind of taking the high road. And if I really sit with that, I don't think that over explaining how he'd messed up would have made me feel better. I think it would have made me feel justified, but I doubt it would have gotten what I needed from the situation. So I tell part of this story because I really don't think that people need a big performance to respect you. They don't need a big explanation, a song and dance, a demonstration to respect you. They need clarity. That clarity, that clear, concise, direct way of speaking is what grows that respect. And I will say, I also think in this case, my clear, direct, and non mm, chiding tone, even though I'm sure he knows he messed up, the fact that I didn't dig into him further, I can only imagine left a slightly better impression, even though he knows that I was not pleased. So anyway, again, this lack of performing, sometimes this feels just saying what you need to say and moving on, saying what you need to say, owning your piece, but not over explaining the boundary. It can feel kind of radical, in my opinion, because I think we've been conditioned to smooth everything over. But yeah, I just think that clarity is actually stronger than a performance like that. So let's dig into this just a little bit. As I mentioned, the scene here is that we had a closing. It was set for a certain day. Uh, there's a lot of things happening that the buyer needs to do to get to closing day. And come closing day, after basically when we should have, like, everything should have been done, and I checked in going, "Hey, I haven't seen any updates. What's up?" I get a message back from escrow that actually the seller has forgotten to do a few things and hasn't wired the funds that they needed to and hasn't closed out certain things. And I'm going, what do you mean? So, of course, when I message the broker, I am asking, hey, like, were you aware of this? Has someone let you know? There was bad communication on a lot of different levels here, um, but especially a lot from the listing agent to his seller and from the listing agent to escrow, it seems. But we can't control. So it delays closing. And instead of kind of assuming responsibility for that, there was this kind of like, oops, like that's how it happens. And that isn't, I don't like that. That's not for me. If someone's like, and that's just the way it is, when it was 100% preventable, that's a big peeve of mine. And so after he started delegating some tasks to me, go ahead and drop this form for a new closing date. Sir, I am not your assistant. Lest we forget, I'm the other person in the contract here who is actually doing my job. So my brain went into overdrive. I wanted to explain, I wanted to educate, I wanted to justify, I wanted to give him like a mini lesson on how things should go. Right. It's like, because he seemed so unaware. I don't know how to describe it. It's just sometimes when people are so unbothered, I'm like, what do you mean? This is a legal contract. You silly person. This is how things are supposed to go. You know that there are repercussions with this, right? So this tension, this burst of energy, this adrenaline coursing through my system, I start to breathe a little bit differently. My hands get a little clammy and I feel like I see red, right? That's how it feels. And so I really did have to ask myself, does he deserve a big performance of nicety, of, oh my gosh, don't even worry about it, no problem, or a lesson, this was your responsibility, you should have da from me right now. And then I realized it was going to most likely take more energy from me to do either of those things than just to respond and say, no, actually, I can't take care of it. That'll be something you need to handle. Let me know when it's sent. And let the way that he perceives me be what it is. The boundaries here, they're not supposed to be lectures. I'm learning. They're not supposed to be lectures. As much as I would like them to be, they are not supposed to be lectures. They are simply statements of truth or what you will and will not accept. And as I'm sitting here talking about this, live processing my own stuff, again, this is the pattern that has come up multiple times this week where I have had something I need to deliver news that I would not like to. I've had moments where I have felt like I am disappointing somebody or letting someone down. And I really had to coach myself through writing or responding back with a lot of extra words, extra explanation, um, over the top discussions about why, or just, you know what I mean? It was coming up a lot. And I guess I would ask you, if you're sitting here moving into the holiday season or moving into the new year, knowing that you want to present a little bit in a more, knowing that you want to present in a stronger, more authoritative way, this would be my question for all of us, is that where in your life are you performing when a simple truth, a simple statement would be enough? And of course, this has me asking myself, where the heck does this over explaining need come into play? I had to send a completely different situation, a different kind of text this week. And I actually talked with a few of my friends about it because I was so concerned about sending this response back. And thank goodness I have a plethora of incredibly smart and kind and emotionally aware women in my life that they could read my messages and go, okay, so this is yours. That's not yours. Like, there's no point in putting that in there. I would maybe take this part out unless you mean this. Like, it's so nice to have that reflection point. But I asked myself, of course, okay, gosh, why? And I can see this too. If someone sends me something, I'm like, slash, slash, slash. I am about to rip apart your email because I think that less is often more. But when it's for ourselves, especially when there's emotion involved, oh my gosh, it's hard. And so I'm asking myself, where the heck does this over explaining come into play? And it comes from conditioning, from anxiety, and again, from this urge to justify or teach, to prove to somebody else and to ourselves that we're not wrong, and to manage the other person's perception of us. So sometimes when we're setting boundaries, we slip into educator mode. We feel like we have to explain why someone can't do something, or prove that they were wrong, or justify why we aren't going to do something. And I'm wondering, okay, so let's talk about some of this. It is called, I mean, approval seeking is the daily word for this, but it's also called sociotropy. And it's this idea of tying your self-worth to approval. People who tie their self-worth to approval are more likely to over-explain boundaries. So this explains the instinct to smooth, to justify, or to teach. Another one that comes up was this anxiety driven over explaining. Like people who over explain are often anxious people. Hello, welcome. And the brain anticipates judgment or conflict. So it wants to clarify literally everything. But the tricky bit about that is that a lot of times it's not your job to clarify. That's not yours. And the third one that came up was talking about emotional labor and energy drain. This is from Rothman Therapy, an article written by them. And it's about this idea that performing a boundary or setting a boundary, it costs energy, it costs attention, and it costs clarity. And so there is an emotional labor to setting boundaries like that. And especially if you have to perform the boundary, it becomes even worse. And then lastly, that over explaining habit that we have, that I have, it dilutes boundary effectiveness. It makes things less clear. It is harder to focus on what exactly we are saying we can or cannot accept because there's so much more for that person to read, to listen to. There's tone, there is facial expression. There's so much more that has to be processed by the other person that it is hard to understand the simple boundary. So the more you justify or teach, the less authority the boundary actually holds. And I've talked about this with my friends where when you get emotional, when you start over explaining, when you yell, when you talk too much, you often feel like you have lost the argument. You've lost the situation. You have lost the power in your boundary because you have diluted it with too much. And that is from a Psychology Today article from this year. So I'm asking myself here, okay, let's just pull back. Where when I think about having to set these boundaries, when I think about having to say no, I won't do that, or no, I can't, or whatever, where have I tried to teach somebody my boundary instead of just stating it? And then I asked myself, how much did that cost me? Like, what did that look like? And what did that feel like having to convince someone that I was allowed to set a particular boundary? What did it cost? So if you're here and you're thinking about, man, what I'm going into this season where I'm going to have to tell people that I don't want to talk about a certain thing or that I am not good with a particular kind of treatment, or maybe you're in a professional situation like I am. If you find yourself drafting a longer message, or if you find yourself needing to speak more, I would strongly advise you to pause, exhale, let all that stale air out, take a breath, and remind yourself that you do not want to dilute the boundary by saying too much. The boundary is enough. Now, if we sit back and we think a little bit more about the internal feelings of having to set these boundaries, is this internal process. Like I have mentioned, when I felt this tightness, this seeing red feeling of needing to write out this big long message and respond in a way that was showing him, making him understand why he was wrong. I'm very lucky that I was actually driving at the moment, so I couldn't respond quickly, but I was able to pause. And like I said, a boundary is not a lesson. It's a statement. It is a simple statement of truth of what you will and will not accept. And when we do that instead, when we simply state what we can and cannot do. And this happened in the other situation this week where when I finally sent the message that I angsted about for a couple of days, actually, um, as scary as it was to hit send, the relief that I felt after the fact of not having to continue arguing or talking about whether or not what I said I was going to do, I was going to do. There wasn't more to talk about because I was very clear whether it was a yes or a no. And that shift, that emotional shift, the relief, the groundedness, the empowerment, but also this feeling of like, wow, I just preserved so much energy. Like, listen, I love to fight. Like I kinda, I mean, you know it. When you're in one of those moods and you're like, "I just wanna fight with someone," and you're kinda, like, a little picky. Maybe you're not, I don't know, maybe this is just me. But I definitely have days where I will say to my husband, I'm like, "Ooh, I'm feeling like I wanna start a fight with you. You're getting a little close. I'm impatient today," right? And I can feel myself wanting to, like, bicker. And when I'm in these situations where I feel like justice wasn't served, or I feel uh, taken advantage of or undermined. Ooh, that's when I feel that, oh, I just want to show you. I just want to write it all out. I want to make it super clear so you know that you are wrong. And man, that doesn't usually make me feel a lot better. It makes me feel more like a child. It makes me feel a little bit more like a tantrum because I'm so caught up in this idea of someone else's perception of me instead of just trusting my perception of myself and knowing that I deserved better treatment, knowing that that wasn't appropriate to ask me. Like there's all these things that come up. So again, I will continue to ask myself this as well as you, the listener. What is a time where you softened or over explained a boundary in order to teach or justify or prove? And what would happen if you simply stated the boundary and then let others handle their own reactions to your simple statement? Like, what if you just let someone else's feelings be their own responsibility instead of yours for once? A dream, right? So just remind yourself boundaries are not supposed to be teaching moments. They often can be because that's what happens when we are the on the receiving end of a boundary. But there's not your moment to over explain. They're statements of what you will and won't do. And clarity without over explanation or apology can shift energy in kind of largely not subtle ways. So, if there's anything that you are taking away from the episode today, a quick oversight here. Boundaries are most powerful when they are simple, clear, and non negotiable. Over explaining as teaching or proving indicates anxiety. Okay. So, when we are over explaining or trying to teach or trying to prove, it indicates anxiety, it indicates approval seeking, and it indicates, well, it is a desire to control perception. And the quick little research uh, notes that you can keep in your brain, I love this word, sociotropy, which is that approval seeking urge. People who struggle to over explain, it often comes from anxiety. Hello, welcome. And if you are going to do that, it actually causes more emotional labor, even though it feels kind of good to do it in the moment. So, here is this question for myself: where can we replace that educational, quote unquote, I'm using quotations again, that educational moment in a boundary setting with just simple, clear, direct clarity? Clarity protects your energy. Okay. It protects your energy, your authority, and your calm. So I do highly recommend it. And it's good for everybody. It might not feel super nice, but that's not what we're about here at Kind of a Bitch. Don't forget. It's not about nice. It's about being kind, and clarity is kind. What I would encourage you to try as we move into this very busy season is do a micro experiment. Do a micro experiment. And if you want to be like me, I am constantly assessing the things that are patterns. So, what is coming up constantly? Because that seems to be the lesson that I need to learn. I'm looking for patterns because obviously the universe is sending something for me to learn from those things. So, if you are having that moment as you move into this holiday season, conduct a micro experiment. Set one boundary this week, next week, over the holidays without explaining, without teaching, or without proving, and see what happens. You might find that you stay calm, but the other person does not. You might. And again, that's just a little more information. That's a little more information. I think the line is something like the only people who take issue with your boundaries are the ones who are planning on crossing them in the first place. So just remember that. You know what I'm saying? And then I would encourage you, and I'm sitting here with it myself. This is my own audio diary, but write down or notice the physical and emotional sensations when we drop the urge to teach, to educate, to over explain. See what happens when you let that emotional labor go. And lastly, I thought I would include a couple of my favorite boundary lines. This has been something that is a constant area of growth for me, of saying less while still saying no, like still saying what I need to say. So I wrote down a couple of these, simply saying, I'm not available for that. This is something that I have worked on, that I've worked on quite a bit, especially being in a place where I can step in to help people a lot. My urge is to do that, is to step in, even if it's wildly inconvenient for me. I feel like I can't say no. And so I have learned that not only can I just say no, but I don't have to provide an explanation. Sorry, I can't do that. I have a doctor's appointment, right? There always used to be this extra, like I had to provide a reasoning as to why I couldn't. And now I'm just saying stuff like, oh, I'm not available for that. Sorry, girl. Like that becomes the whole sentence. Additionally, I love saying no, but providing a solution. So saying what I'm not willing to do, but then what I am willing to do. I like this one the best. This is what I use the most with my clients and with other agents, because this is collaboration. You can still have boundaries, but be a fantastic collaborator. So I will say, oh, that's not going to work for me, but here's what will. Or I'm not able to take care of it at that time, but I could do this time or this time. What works best, right? Like I'm providing other options. I will say, as someone who does this well, I don't love when someone just says a clear no. Like if I'm working with someone, if someone's just like, no, I can't, then I always want to know, okay, then what can you do? Especially if it's something where we do actually have to work together. Um, so I am a huge fan of providing an alternative solution. And then lastly, I can't take that on right now, but please feel free to, right? Like I can't simply saying I can't take that on right now, but perhaps in the new year. I can't take that on right now, but um, but let me know if you can't get to it later, and we'll make another plan. Right? There's like there's a lot of ways that you can do this, and I think that these sound really kind to me, but they also still maintain your own space. Again, we are emphasizing neutral, firm, and very simple delivery. There's no attitude, there's no tone. It's just a simple statement of fact. So I really would recommend you need to, I like this idea of practicing these out loud, because when you have to say a boundary, it feels a lot different than typing it. But I do recommend starting in text. This is something that I've played with my husband when he has to respond to contracts and whatnot. Is we have done a lot of work in getting good at writing the way that we speak, right? And that's something that I honestly, I owe a lot of the way that I speak to the way that I write. So if you are able to communicate in writing in a clear, direct, but kind way, without dots and periods and all caps, all these things that indicate some kind of attitude or some kind of tone, if you're able to get to a place where you're really good at doing that, you will see it bleed into your spoken communication. So, with that, this week, I want you to notice where you feel the urge to explain, to teach, or to prove. And again, that is your moment to pause and to choose clarity and directness instead. Boundaries are not moments to teach a lesson. Okay. It is not a moment to teach a lesson. Clarity, simplicity will protect your energy, your authority, and also will keep you a heck of a lot calmer. The moment, I swear to you, the moment that we stop performing, that we stop teaching, that we stop overdoing it in terms of setting boundaries, saying no, something along those lines, and we just state our truth, we will reclaim our energy, our authority, and our groundedness. What is the boundary that you will practice this week without explaining, without teaching, or without proving anything? All I'm saying is that it might feel a little radical at first. It might feel a little scary, a little mean, but it's also very freeing. And I'm telling you, the world will adjust. The world will adjust, and you will as well. You might find a totally different feeling overcomes you when you remove that need to overgive, especially when you're trying to give a little less, you know? So, with that, everyone, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wherever and whenever you are listening, I will speak to you next week. Bye.